Look, I want you to understand something right out of the gate because this is one of those moments that people will misinterpret if they don't slow down and really think it through. Ripple didn't just get good news. Ripple didn't just get a regulatory nod. Ripple didn't just score a headline that pumps the price for a weekend. Ripple crossed a line that most crypto companies will never even be allowed to walk up to. And the reason almost nobody is explaining this correctly is because most people still don't understand how power actually works inside the US financial system. When you hear the words conditional approval from the OC to charter a national trust bank, that's not Ripple asking permission to exist. That's Ripple being invited to build infrastructure inside the system itself. That's not crypto knocking on the door anymore. That's crypto being told, you can come in through the front entrance, but only if you play by the highest rules we have. And the wild part, Ripple said yes. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what the OC just gave Ripple permission to build, why RLUSD quietly received a compliance upgrade that most stablecoins can't even dream of, how this creates a real pathway toward Federal Reserve payment rails like FedWire and FedNow, and why this shifts the entire XRP conversation away from speculation and toward infrastructure. And yes, we'll talk price, but not moon math. Real mechanics, the stuff that actually moves markets over time. And if you're serious about 100xing your wealth, you need the XRP Millionaire Blueprint. This is the exact framework I use to identify asymmetric XRP opportunities before the crowd. Positioning, timing, and capital flow strategies designed to turn conviction into exponential gains. And if you want free leverage to start, you can get free NVDA stocks up to $1,000 when you deposit just $100 using my Moomoo link. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Now let me explain why this matters in a way that actually makes sense. For years, crypto has been standing outside the most exclusive club in America, the US banking system, and people misunderstand who controls access to that club. It's not social media hype, it's not ETFs, it's not even market size, it's regulation, and more importantly, it's permission. Most crypto companies never even get to speak to the bouncer. They either stay offshore, hide behind partner banks, create layered structures, or operate in legal gray zones that work right up until the rules change. Ripple didn't do that. Ripple walked straight up to the front door, made eye contact, and said, "We're going to do this under your supervision." That is what this moment represents. And to understand why that's rare, you need to understand what the OC actually is. The Office of the Controller of the Currency is not just another regulator. It is one of the primary federal banking regulators in the United States. It oversees national banks and national trust banks. These are entities that operate directly under federal oversight, not state-by-state patchwork rules. When the OC gives conditional approval, that means the applicant has already passed deep reviews around governance, capital structure, risk management, compliance systems, and operational readiness. Conditional does not mean symbolic. Conditional means you've cleared the hard part. Now execute. Ripple receiving conditional approval to charter Ripple National Trust Bank means they are being allowed to proceed inside a federally supervised banking framework once final operational requirements are satisfied. This is not Ripple becoming a bank tomorrow. This is Ripple being acknowledged as capable of building one. And the difference between being adjacent to banking and being inside the system is massive night and day. When you're adjacent, you depend on partners. When you're inside, you build rails. This is where most people get the trust bank concept wrong. So let's clear it up. A national trust bank is not Wells Fargo. It's not Bank of America. It doesn't exist to hand out mortgages or open checking accounts for consumers. A trust bank focuses on custody, safeguarding assets, fiduciary services, settlement, payments, and holding reserves under strict oversight. In other words, it does exactly what a regulated stablecoin issuer and payments company needs. Ripple is not trying to become a consumer bank. That would be a distraction. What Ripple is building is institutional grade plumbing, and plumbing is where real power lives. This is why our loose D suddenly matters a lot more than people realize. Stablecoins are simple on paper, a token that represents a dollar-backed one-to-one. But in the real world, the questions that actually matter are, where are the reserves held, who audits them, who supervises them, how redemptions work under stress, and what happens when the system is under pressure. Most stablecoins operate in tolerated frameworks. Ripple is positioning RLUSD to operate in a pointed-to framework. There is a massive difference. Brad Garlingus's comments weren't accidental. when he talked about setting a higher standard and took subtle shots at legacy banking skepticism toward crypto, he was signaling something important. Ripple isn't trying to avoid regulation. Ripple is trying to become the example regulators reference. With OC oversight combined with NYDFS oversight, RLUSD is being positioned as a federally supervised institution, ready dollar token that changes who can touch it. Funds, enterprises, payment companies, banks, all the players who couldn't engage with stablecoins comfortably before suddenly have something they can justify using. And that's the real unlock, not retail hype, institutional usability. Now let's address the headline that everyone loves to oversimplify. Ripple gets access to the Federal Reserve. Here's the clean truth. OC approval does not automatically grant Ripple a Federal Reserve master account or direct access to Fed rails. But it does something far more important. It places Ripple on one of the most credible pathways toward eligibility. FedWire and FedNow are the back-end pipes of US dollar movement. If you can connect closer to those pipes, you reduce intermediaries, reduce friction, reduce settlement time, reduce costs, and reduce failure points. Instead of routing redemptions and issuances through multiple banking partners, you move closer to the source. That's why this moment matters. It's not crypto versus banks. It's crypto becoming banking infrastructure. Now let's connect this to XRP in a way that's grounded in reality, not fantasy. The cleanest model looks like this. RLUSD functions as the regulated compliance first dollar representation. XRP functions as the liquidity and bridge asset where speed, efficiency, and cross-border value transfer actually matter. Not because anyone declares XRP official money, but because it becomes useful inside a system that institutions already trust. That distinction is everything. Markets don't reprick assets only on usage. They reprick on expectation of future usage. And that's where this starts to matter for XRP's valuation. Narrative repricing comes first. Ripple is no longer framed as a crypto company fighting relevance. It's being framed as a regulated financial infrastructure builder. That alone shifts how capital views the ecosystem. Institutional comfort follows. Institutions don't buy tokens, they buy frameworks. The more Ripple is perceived as inside the rules, the more capital is willing to engage with the stack around it. Does that mean straight line price action? No. Crypto doesn't work that way. Pullbacks happen, leverage gets flushed, headlines get faded. But structurally, this is the kind of development that changes what XRP is valued as. And this didn't happen overnight. Ripple has been playing a long game. Legal, regulatory, political engagement at the highest levels, direct conversations with policymakers. This isn't about hype. In the US, innovation moves on permission. Many crypto companies tried to force that permission. Ripple tried to earn it, and that's why this moment feels different. The banking lobby pushback that Brad alluded to, that's real. Banks make enormous profits on slow settlement, intermediaries, correspondent networks, and friction. Anything that compresses that threatens legacy revenue. So, when Ripple calls out anti-competitive tactics, what they're really saying is this. Once crypto became capable of operating inside regulation, it stopped being ignorable. And that's where this gets interesting because now we're moving into a phase where infrastructure decisions matter more than speculation cycles, where positioning beats noise, and where the rails underneath the system start to matter more than the headlines above it. And with that context in place, the next layer we need to unpack is how this setup actually evolves from here. What pressure points still exist and how XRP fits as this framework starts interacting with real-world settlement flows. Here's the next layer most people are missing. Becoming a nationally chartered trust bank doesn't just change who Ripple can work with. It changes how those relationships are structured. Today, most crypto-related settlement still depends on correspondent banking relationships. That means delays, cutoff times, batching, reconciliation, and human intervention. Even instant systems usually hide legacy plumbing underneath. Ripple positioning itself as a regulated trust bank means it can sit closer to the asset custody, reserve management, and settlement logic itself. That's where efficiency compounds. Think about how payments actually fail in the real world. It's not because blockchains are slow, it's because compliance checks, liquidity availability, time zones, and intermediary approvals break the flow. A trust bank structure allows Ripple to design around those choke points. Custody and reserves under one roof, issuance and redemption rules enforced by the same entity. risk management frameworks aligned with regulators instead of bolted on afterward. That's how you get systems that institutions are willing to rely on, not experiment with. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room: competition. If you're a bank, a payments processor, or a large enterprise, you don't care who wins crypto Twitter debates. You care about reliability, compliance, cost, and speed. Stablecoins like USDC and UTST prove demand exists, but they also exposed limits. Questions around reserve transparency, redemption mechanics under stress, and regulatory exposure never fully went away. RLUSD isn't trying to outmarket those coins, it's trying to outqualify them. And that's why the trust bank angle matters. When reserves are held, supervised, audited, and examined under federal standards, the conversation changes from "can we use this" to "why wouldn't we use this?" That's a subtle shift, but it's a powerful one. Now, let's zoom in on XRP's role without falling into extremes. XRP does not need to be everything to be valuable. It doesn't need to replace the dollar. It doesn't need governments to declare it legal tender. Its value proposition has always been narrow but potent: fast, liquid, low-cost value transfer. The question has never been whether XRP works. The question has been whether institutions are comfortable relying on it at scale. This regulatory progress directly addresses that discomfort. If RLUSD becomes a trusted, regulated dollar representation inside a Ripple-controlled, federally supervised framework, XRP naturally fits as the bridge where dollars need to move across jurisdictions, currencies, or systems that don't share the same rails. That's not ideology, that's plumbing logic. And here's the part people underestimate. Once institutions integrate systems, they rarely rip them out. They layer, they expand, they optimize. If Ripple Stack gets embedded into settlement workflows, usage doesn't show up as one big announcement. It shows up quietly, steadily, and then suddenly everyone realizes it's everywhere. This is why price discussions need to mature. XRP's price will not move solely because of this news. Markets are forward-looking, but they're also impatient. Traders sell headlines. Leverage amplifies noise. That's normal. But structural developments like this change the long-term demand profile. They alter who can buy, who will use, and how capital allocates over time. This is not financial advice. There are three forces to watch from here. First, integration velocity. How quickly does Ripple move from conditional approval to full operational readiness? That timeline matters. The faster they execute, the sooner this shifts from narrative to reality. Second, institutional signaling. Watch who publicly acknowledges or partners around RLUSD and settlement infrastructure. Institutions don't rush announcements, but when they do speak, it's deliberate. Third, regulatory tone. The OC doesn't hand out approvals lightly. How other regulators reference this decision will tell you whether Ripple is being treated as an exception or a template. And yes, banks will resist. Of course they will. Any compression of settlement time and fees threatens legacy margins, but resistance doesn't always win. Often it slows things down just long enough for the outcome to become inevitable. This is why the old framing of crypto versus banks is outdated. The real shift is which crypto becomes infrastructure. Most projects never even get a seat at that table. Ripple just did. Now let's bring this back to you, the investor, the holder, the person trying to make sense of where this all leads. This is not a call for blind optimism. It's a call for clarity. Clarity about time horizons, clarity about risk, clarity about what actually creates durable value. Short-term price action will do what it always does. Long-term positioning is where asymmetric outcomes are built. Ripple choosing regulation wasn't the easy path. It was slower, more expensive, and more frustrating. But moments like this are why they chose it. You don't fight multi-year legal battles just to survive. You do it to earn the right to build something permanent. And that's what this approval represents, not the finish line, the foundation. From here, everything becomes more concrete: how RLUSD scales, how XRP liquidity is utilized, how payment corridors evolve, how institutions plug in. These aren't hypothetical anymore. They're operational questions. And that's when markets start to reprick not just assets, but entire sectors. And if your goal is to 100 times your wealth, the XRP Millionaire Blueprint breaks down exactly how smart money positions early, manages risk, and compounds aggressively around XRP for outsized gains. And to stack free upside, Moomoo is offering free NVDA stocks up to $1,000 with just a $100 deposit. a no-brainer way to boost your capital instantly. Both are linked in the pinned comment.